Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dalaran, and we got some more patch 9.1 stuff to take a look at. In this video, we're going to take a look at some of the newer legendaries that are available for testing on PTR, and I'm going to give you guys my thoughts on those Legos, as well as legendaries that have been data mined but not confirmed to be official just yet. Sometimes early versions of legendaries get data mined, or legendaries that never get implemented, but at least it gives us an idea of where Blizzard's head is at on some of the other class Legos, as only a handful of classes have actually had a full set of legendaries testable on PTR, and there's plenty of classes like monks and hunters, for example, that don't even have full lists. But because we're so excited for these Legos, I do want to take a look at some of the early iterations as well, even though they're not 100% confirmed. So let's dive into some of the Legos that are testable, and then talk about the data-mined legendaries. The first one is going to be the Paladin Nightfall legendary has been adjusted and is finally testable. As someone who plays Nightfall Paladin and kind of enjoys it, I really want a day for Nightfall Paladin to be good, at least in some specific scenario, in some niche situation where the Nightfall Paladin is actually worth considering. As of right now, the Kirin and Venthyr are way too good, do way too much damage, and are just simply the strongest options for Paladins right now. But with this new legendary, we do have Seasons of Plenty, which is a legendary that's going to empower your blessings for 10 seconds out of the 30-second duration. So with this Lego, when you use your blessing, for 10 seconds you'll have the original effect. Then for 10 seconds after those first 10, you'll have an empowered version of that effect, where your Nightfall blessing is actually 100% more effective. So for example, Blessing of Summer is going to give you 80% chance to do 60% extra damage as Holy, which is pretty good. It's going to give you 60% cooldown reduction with the CDR one. Blessing of Winter is just more frost damage, which isn't super high right now, and more of a debuff mechanic to slow down enemies' auto attacks. Then Healing of Spring can be buffed up to 20% healing done or 40% healing taken. And if you give it to a tank that self-heals, that could be a pretty big combo. And as much as I want this Covenant Paladin class combo to be good, I doubt it will be. So far, it's not even considered seriously by any of the players. And while I do think that the legendary change for Nightfall is a better version than what Blizzard was originally trying to do, it does make it less group reliant and better just whether you use it on yourself or others. But I still feel like the synergy between Fae and Paladin is way too early to be accepted by a large swath of players, simply because it doesn't stand super well on its own 2 feet. And I don't think this legendary is going to do too much in terms of bolstering it. When it comes to priest legendaries, we have 2 that are testable and 2 that are unconfirmed. We'll start with the confirmed legendaries first. One, Somebody's Pact and Shadow Word Manipulation. And of course, Blizzard will put up legendaries for a class I still do not have at max level, but I've talked to quite a few priests that are cutting edge, that actually play priest on a regular, and that gave me their thoughts. But Somebody's Pact is pretty decent, because every time you use Shadow Word Death, your Fake Guardians will be more empowered. That means cooldown reduction will be better, defensive will be better, as well as mana regen should also be better for your party. This one is interesting, however, because that is more cooldown reduction. Stronger cooldown reduction than it already is. And that could be good, because a DPS, for example, can use their cooldowns more often throughout a fight, but also can desync your cooldowns for specific fights. There's a reason why some cooldowns are 2-minute and 3-minute, and Blizzard even designs mechanics for bosses for players to deal with. For example, if a boss, let's say, gets a shield at X amount of time, your mages and boomies might have to save some kind of 2-minute CDs in order to deal with that shield before a wipe. And on Somebody's Pact, it might actually just run into an issue where you're just going to have more cooldown reduction and then desyncing cooldowns completely. It's really good at first, more cooldowns and more effectiveness. But in terms of like competitive raid aspect, PvE, when you're super tryharding it, it could run into some issues. As for the Venthyr Lego, it's a lot more simple, and it's just really good on paper. Mind Games as an ability does quite a bit of damage. For Disc Priest, that's damage that converts into healing. And even for Holy Priests who are not really specifically all into just one Covenant, they dip their toes in just about every single one. It's still a decent button if you want to do a bit more damage, but also has some healing components as well. Hard to tell if this legendary is going to be headstrong, competing against the other already good Disc Priest, Holy Priest, and Shadow Priest legendaries, but it definitely has a dog in the fight. And with some more testing, I'm sure some Disc Priests might be able to find a way to get quite a lot of bursts out of Mind Games, and also quite a lot of atonement healing for their allies. As for the unconfirmed legendaries, you have Palette Command for your Necrolord, where you cast Unholy Nova summons a Maldraxxi champion to aid you for X seconds. Each time an ally is healed by Unholy Transfusion, your Maldraxxi champion's healing and damage is increased by 1% up to a maximum number. How big is this number going to be, and how long is duration of this champion is going to be, unconfirmed. But the idea of you summoning a undead minion like some kind of a necromancer does excite me, and it all depends if this guy is going to be able to AoE heal or do AoE damage, and will it work with Disgrace Atonement mechanic. But I like it because the cooldown of that ability is pretty short, and adding some kind of a minion that can do damage and healing can give this hybridness a little bit more of a spin, especially if this guy can do AoE in Mythic Pluses or strong single target, or if anything at least decent single target. Then we have Spheres of Harmony for Kyrian, where Boon of the Ascended's cooldown is reduced by 2 seconds, up to 60 seconds for each stack of Boon of the Ascended consumed during Ascendant Eruption. Generally, the Kyrian ability is considered by many priests as a really strong cooldown, but it is pretty long. It's a 3-minute cooldown. It's not something you'll be able to use quite often. So having it down to a 2-minute cooldown, maybe together with PI to sync up a little bit better, it could potentially be decent on its own. I guess the question really comes down to how strong is Boon of the Ascended as a 2-minute cooldown rather than a 3-minute cooldown. And we'll have to find that out once we have this legendary testable for us to play around with. Hunter's got some unconfirmed legendaries, starting off with Fragments of Elder Antlers. Wild Spirits, when it hits fewer than 5 targets, there's a 200% chance for each target hit to be damaged by Wild Spirits a second time. Blizzard took a look at the legendary synergy with the Serpent Sting aim shot Lego and how it used to interact with Wild Spirits, providing you lots of little blasts of Wild Spirits to single target as well as AoE. And ever since they kind of deleted the combo by making it impossible to synergize in a similar way, it looks like they're trying to bring it back to the table, just in the form of a legendary. If this one does come out as is, it could potentially be a really strong option for Wild Spirits Hunters, and Nightfall Hunter could be back in business as the strongest and potentially the only option Hunters have to play with. Then the current ability, when your Resonating Arrow deals damage to a target, your party gains 5% increased critical strike chance for until cancelled. Providing a crit buff to your party isn't terrible. It could be interesting in Mythic Pluses. 5% would be a pretty low number in my opinion, but it's an interesting idea. I don't really know because, again, party buffs are not super strong as legendaries or as Covenant abilities generally, or at least not really seen as strong by the community. I don't really know how good this one will be. The Necrolord one really blasted away though. Up to 5 targets hit by your Death Chakram are also hit by Explosive Shot. Marksman Hunter, Explosive Shot. Now, if this can hit the primary boss 5 times with Explosive Shot, this is going to be a broken legendary. Absolutely insane. But the AoE damage of a Necrolord playstyle that's mostly focused on single target is going to be huge going forward. But even the AoE component is massive. For a Covenant ability that's all single target, this is a huge AoE component to add into it, and a very strong one. I think that actually could make Nightfall useless, especially if you can hit that boss 5 times with an Explosive Shot. I doubt it will. It seems like it's a Mythic Plus legendary, but it could make Hunters as a Necrolord AoE playstyle super good going forward. Then we have a lot of powerful options for Warlocks. Starting off with the Necrolord, not the strongest one. Decimated Bolt also increases the critical strike chance and critical strike damage of Demon Bolt, Incinerate, and Shadow Bolt by 15%. This is actually a Torghast power, so it makes sense to bring a Torghast power as a potential legendary. I think there's some synergy with crit heavy playstyles for Destruction Warlock, maybe somewhat for Demonology as a haste crit alternative playstyle. I don't think that one will be really good because, I mean, I guess it could really be decent for pure single target output, especially if you get that crit, especially if you get that crit damage increase, but I just don't feel super strong about the Necrolord side. Decaying Soul Satchel for Nightfall seems pretty busted though. Each target affected by Soul Rot increases your haste and crit chance by 50% for until cancelled. Now this 50% chance to haste and crit seems insane, pretty sure that number is going to be much lower, but allowing the ability of Soul Rot to give you extra stats like haste and crit, I think could be pretty huge for Warlocks. Even if it was just 5% per target hit, just hitting 4 targets or 3 targets gives you quite a lot of haste and quite a lot of crit. If this one comes out in the same way, just change to the numbers, depending on the numbers, this one could be an incredibly strong legendary. Contained Perpetual Explosion for Venthyr Impending Catastrophe Final Explosion damage is increased by 50%, plus 10% for each enemy it hits on the way to the final target. This, I think, could be a big AoE nuke legendary with some good focus damage, but the Venthyr Covenant itself for Warlocks isn't super good, except for maybe AoE situations. There are Warlocks that play Venthyr, but there's not a lot of them. Most of them are Night Fae, maybe even some Necrolords here and there. I think this could be a really interesting combo. I wonder how good it'll be in pure AoE damage, but Warlocks already have such strong legendaries for all three specs, it's going to be pretty hard to compete with. Language to Soul Detritus for Kyrian. When Scouring Tithe generates soul shards, that means when you apply it on the enemy and the enemy dies before Scouring Tithe runs out for its full duration, it can generate you 5 soul shards. So when you drop it on a target and then that target dies while the dot is still on them, you also get an extra effect with the legendary where you gain 100% increased movement speed and 100% critical strike chance for 8 seconds. This one I hope will be pretty good. Just because, one, there's not a lot of Kyrian Warlocks out there. There are some, but it's, again, not a popular covenant like Venthyr. But two, 8% crit chance, that could be a lot of Chaos Bolts. That could be a lot of damage for your Tyrant. That could be a lot of damage output with your dots. And with how bursty all three specs of Warlocks are, yes, even Affliction, a spec that's supposed to be mostly all about dots, there is, I think, opportunity for burst. However, it'll be pretty difficult to line it up, because you not only need to make sure it's on the right target, make sure the target dies at the right time while your full cooldowns are rolling. So unless Warlocks can find a way to cheese it, where they can use it on maybe like a, I don't know, a critter or something, it's going to be pretty hard for them to be able to line this up every single time in a raid situation, but maybe in dungeons it could be good. I like the idea behind this legendary, and even if this one came out as is, I think Warlocks would try to see if they can make it work, but I do think that this one would be one of the harder legendaries to line up. Then we have some unconfirmed legendaries for Shamans as well, for the Venthyr as well as the Night Fae, and I really like these ones actually. For the Venthyr, it's called Elemental Conduit. Each friendly targeted by Chain Harvest automatically receives a Riptide, and every enemy damaged by Chain Harvest automatically receives a Flame Shock. This one could be pretty good, because Riptide playstyle for Restoration Shamans is quite huge, but the Necrolord playstyle allows you, with a legendary, a lot of Riptides back to back to back. And I don't really know if Venthyr is going to be able to fit those big shoes either, but it could maybe be kind of okay. I like this one for the Flame Shocks for Elemental Shamans more than anything, because Elemental Shamans don't have an easy way to apply Flame Shocks on everybody. Together with your Fire Elemental, you could prolong those dots for quite a bit, and that could be a lot of Lava Bursts, creating a pretty big bursty window. I think because of that potential, it could maybe be used by some Venthyr. It'll be really cool, although Shamans do have pretty strong legendaries as is, and the Covenant ones are going to have quite a bit of competition. Then we have Seeds of Rampant Growth, and I really like this one. Night Fae. Each pulse of Fate Transfusion's damage effect reduces the cooldown of Feral Spirits by 7 seconds, Healing Tide by 5 seconds, and Fire Elemental by 6 seconds. That's quite a bit of cooldown reduction, especially since the way Transfusion works, it's a channeled ability that does few different pulses while you're channeling on the enemy. So it's not one big ability, I think it's just a bunch of little hits. So all these little hits will amount to quite a bit of cooldown reduction. Now the Fae ability has quite a CD of its own. It's about a 2-minute CD and can be modified by lowering the CD with a conduit. So pairing this together with a conduit could give you quite a bit of cooldown reduction. I think this one has potential because I love the ability of CDR for a variety of different classes. The more cooldown reduction we can get, the better in my opinion, because that could just add certain components that classes normally just do not come with, and that could definitely change the way the game is played. Fire Mage, obvious example for the Night Fae playstyle. The cooldown reduction does allow the Minute Mage to be a thing, so every single minute you have a powerful combustion cooldown to throw at the boss or at any of the trash bags or mechanics or whatever it may be. Don't know how strong this one will be, but I am really excited about the potential. But that's going to be all the Legos we have to play with or to look at right now until we have some more legendaries available next week. I'm really hoping we'll see some of those Warlock and Hunter legendaries going forward, even the Shamans. But I'm hoping we also get to see some Monk legendaries, because that's one class that hasn't seen a single change on 9.1 so far. Not saying that it needs some changes, but seeing what some of the legendaries that Blizzard can come up with, maybe to make the Venthyr playstyle, the Fae playstyle, which are lesser played compared to the Kyrian, for example, more optimal. overall though, very excited to see what are some of the other Legos we'll get going forward in 9.1. So far, I think Blizzard has made some great Legos and more iterations need to be done. Quite a few classes have some interesting choices, some more interesting than others, of course. So hopefully Blizzard continues iterating and trying to adjust these Covenant Legendaries that are looking not nearly as good. But thank you guys so much for checking out this video. I do hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know what you think about all these Legos covered in this video. And as always, I'll see all of you in another one.